My VP found out the hard way that some bridges don't burn, they explode when you try to cross them without the person who built them. The morning he launched the biggest project of his career without inviting me, without crediting me, and without even mentioning my name, he didn't realize he'd just pressed the first button of the kill clause I'd drafted 2 years earlier. He'd been too arrogant to ask what it was for. Too proud to believe he might ever need my permission. And far too blinded by greed to understand that the entire system he was showcasing to the world was silently counting down to a shutdown he couldn't stop. I wasn't always this cold. For years, I poured my soul into that company. I created a platform that took us from mid-tier vendor to an industry leader in under 18 months. I coded the backbone, designed the integrations, built the analytics engine, and wrote every line of the operational contract that governed how the system could be used. The VP, Mark Hanley, strutted around like a visionary, but he couldn't debug a toaster. He was the executive face, while I was the architect, the strategist, the one who made his ideas appear real. And for a long time, I tolerated it. I told myself it was fine as long as the work spoke for itself. But the day he started positioning himself as the genius behind the platform, I realized he wasn't just overstepping, he was building a career on top of mine. The moment I saw their press release, I knew exactly what he'd done. They launched the global rollout of the software without me in the room. He had staged the entire announcement as if he'd personally delivered the breakthrough. He even took a few thinly veiled shots at unnamed senior engineers who need to adapt, knowing the crowd would assume he was talking about people beneath him. People like me. He wanted to erase me. He just didn't know I'd prepared for that exact scenario. 2 years earlier, while drafting a compliance document for the platform, I'd slipped in a provision called the Authorized Deployment Governance Clause, the kill clause. It stated that any major system launch, expansion, or public deployment required the authenticated approval of the lead system's architect, me. Without that approval, the platform had 72 hours of autonomous grace period before entering security lockdown mode. I never hid the clause. I put it right in the contract. Legal signed it. Mark signed it. He just never read beyond page 6. When they launched without my approval, the timer started. But I didn't touch anything. I let the system follow the rules they had agreed to. For the next 3 days, Mark strutted around like he owned the world. Tech blogs praised the rollout. Investors cheered. He gave interviews about innovation culture and human capital optimization, and when someone asked him about my role, he smirked and said, "Everyone contributes where they can." That was his last moment of glory. On the morning of hour 72, while the executive team was live streaming a follow-up showcase to investors, the platform began shutting itself down. First the dashboards. Then the analytics. Then the automation engines. Then every customer portal across 14 countries. Every screen went blank with the same message: deployment unauthorized. Governance clause activated. Mark froze mid-sentence. His face drained of color. He tried to laugh it off. He tried blaming routine maintenance. He tried calling IT, but every engineer began telling him the same thing: the system was functioning exactly as designed. And finally someone said it on the open call: "We need the lead systems architect to unlock it." That was me. Mark broke into a sweat. He stepped off camera. He called me 6 times in 3 minutes. I watched the phone buzz, each call more desperate, more frantic. By the time he tried texting, he'd lost all professionalism. "Please. I need you. They're all looking at me. Just fix it. We can talk. I'll credit you. I'll promote you. Just fix it." I didn't. Because 48 hours before the launch, he'd forced HR to process my resignation. "Budget restructuring," he'd said. Your role is no longer aligned with our vision. But the contract was still aligned with my signature. The board dragged him into an emergency meeting. The feed cut out for investors. Clients flooded support lines. The company bled nearly $18 million in lost usage, refunds, SLA violations, and canceled deals in a single day. Mark tried to spin a story blaming rogue engineers, but legal pulled the contract, read it aloud, and realized the kill clause had been fully approved by him. They fired him within the hour. Only then did they call me. Only then did they ask for help. And I did help, for a price. Their new offer had 7 zeros and a clause that guaranteed my independence, ownership rights, and a seat on the advisory board. I unlocked the system in under a minute. Sometimes revenge isn't about sabotage. Sometimes it's about writing the rules so that the people who underestimate you are the ones who sign their own downfall. When the system came back online, the entire company exhaled like they'd been holding their breath for 3 days straight. Servers hummed again, dashboards reappeared, clients logged back in across continents. But the relief didn't erase the fact that they had just watched their prized visionary VP fall apart live in front of investors, customers, and half the executive team. It didn't erase the panic, the lawsuits already rolling in, or the fact that Mark had dragged them all into a disaster entirely of his own making. What surprised me wasn't that they needed me. What surprised me was how quickly they forgot who caused the problem. Within a day, HR and legal were bending over backward, offering deals, contracts, incentives, anything to get me to stabilize the upcoming phases. They had entire teams drafting fresh proposals, each sweeter than the last. CFOs wanted meetings. Directors wanted to repair the relationship. The CEO herself called me, and for the first time since I'd known her, there was actual humility in her voice. But I didn't rush. I didn't grovel. I didn't try to look grateful. I let them wait. For the first time in my career, the power wasn't in their office, it was in my silence. And they knew it. Meanwhile, Mark wasn't handling his fall from grace quietly. Reports were flying around the company about how he stormed out of the building, screaming at anyone who crossed his path. He blamed IT. He blamed compliance. He blamed legal. He blamed engineers sabotaging him out of jealousy. Finally, he tried calling me again, but this time, his tone had shifted. It wasn't demanding. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even apologetic. It was broken. He said he never thought it would go that far. He said I should have been included, but you know how politics is. And when he realized I wasn't buying any of it, he said the one thing that told me everything I needed to know, just tell me, how did you know this could happen? I almost laughed. Because Mark never understood the simplest truth of all. People who build systems don't hope for the best, they plan for the worst. Eventually, after days of letting them sweat, I finally agreed to meet the board. Not in their office. Not on their terms. They came to me, conference room rented in a neutral location. When they walked in, all of them looked subdued. Like the universe had slapped the arrogance out of them. The CEO offered me an apology that was honest enough I didn't dismiss it. The CFO presented a revised contract with everything I demanded: ownership stakes, autonomy, a direct reporting line to the board, veto power over system launches, and a compensation package that made my old salary look like pocket change. But the part that mattered most was simple: they finally saw my value. Not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice. I took the deal, not out of loyalty, but practicality. I wasn't coming back as their employee. I was coming back as the person they now understood they couldn't function without. And as they left the room, the CEO paused at the door and said, "It won't happen again." I nodded. But inside, I knew better. It would happen again if they ever forgot the lesson. Which is why the kill clause stayed in place. Quiet. Legal. Untouched. A reminder that respect isn't just earned once, it must be maintained. For a few weeks, things felt almost surreal. Suddenly I was the person everyone wanted to impress, the one executives tiptoed around, the one whose calendar filled faster than the CEO's. Engineers who once looked past me now hung on my every word. Directors who used to cut my budgets were now eager to collaborate. It wasn't respect, not yet. It was fear disguised as cooperation. And honestly, I didn't mind. Fear, when it comes to corporate hierarchy, is often the only thing that keeps people honest. But while the board was busy reinventing their attitudes, the real storm was forming elsewhere. Clients were asking questions. Regulators were requesting documentation. And the press was digging deeper into why a major enterprise platform collapsed 72 hours after launch. They found the kill clause. They found the signatures. They found the timeline. And slowly, the narrative shifted. This wasn't a technical glitch. This wasn't unexpected downtime. This wasn't a rogue engineer. This was a system doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect itself from unauthorized leadership. The headlines wrote themselves: company launches platform without architect, system activates safeguard. VP overrode protocols, ignored warnings, triggered shutdown. Governance failure exposes major leadership gap. Mark's name was everywhere. Not as a visionary. Not as an innovator. But as the guy who tanked his own career by not reading a contract. He tried fighting back. He went on social media. He tried interviews. He tried claiming I trapped him. But the more he talked, the more everyone realized the truth: he had no idea how the system worked. None. He'd been selling a product built entirely by people he thought were beneath him. And now those same people were stepping forward: engineers, analysts, designers, sharing stories of how often he dismissed their concerns, stole their ideas, or shut down conversations he didn't understand. The narrative was snowballing, and he couldn't outrun it. Meanwhile, inside the company, I began noticing something interesting. The board wasn't just relieved to have me back, they were relying on me to steady the ship. They'd lost confidence in their own leadership. Every time a decision needed technical weight, they looped me in. Every time a director pushed a risky idea, the board asked, "What does he think?" It was subtle, but unmistakable. I was becoming the de facto power behind the scenes. One evening, the CEO invited me to sit in on a strategic session with the top 7 executives, something she'd never done before. I listened as they debated next steps: market positioning, damage control. They all danced around the real issue: they needed trust rebuilt. Not just internally, but externally. Finally, the room went quiet, and the CEO turned to me. "What would you do?" she asked. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't a test. It was acknowledgement. So I told them the truth. "Stop pretending this was an accident," I said. "Tell clients exactly what went wrong. Own it. Fix the governance structure. And stop letting people without technical comprehension make technical decisions." Several executives shifted uncomfortably, because they knew exactly who that was aimed at. But the CEO nodded. The CFO nodded. Even legal nodded. For the first time, the company wasn't just hearing me, they were listening. And that's when I realized something I never expected: revenge wasn't just the destruction of the person who wronged me. Revenge was becoming the person they could never ignore again. The next morning, the office felt different, quieter, tighter, as if everyone knew some invisible wire was stretched across the floor and we were all one wrong step from setting it off. Sarah, the VP who had pushed me out of my own launch, walked around with the posture of someone who'd already decided she'd won. She was polished, early, smiling like an overconfident politician. She didn't even look in my direction as she breezed by my desk, though I caught the edge of her perfume, sweet, expensive, and trying too hard. She should have been nervous. She just didn't know it yet. By noon, the Launch Without Liam campaign was live across every major platform. The team celebrated. Sarah strutted into every room like she was filming a victory documentary. And I waited. Patient. Calm. Almost bored. The kill clause wasn't a button or a code or some dramatic red switch. It was a sequence, legal, operational, contractual. A lock and key design built for one purpose: if the company ever attempted to launch without proper authorization from the system's architect, me, the entire back end would automatically revert to manual approval required. It wasn't sabotage. It was a safety mechanism. One the executives signed and forgot about. By 1:17 p.m., exactly 43 minutes after launch, the notification started. Order halted, missing system architect verification, AD spend frozen, auto protection triggered, API access denied, authorization signature not found. I heard the panic before I saw it, muffled voices rising behind the glass walls, chairs scraping, footsteps quickening. Then came the first shout. Why is the payment gateway down? Who removed Sarah's override? The second landed harder. Where the hell is Liam? He built the architecture. Suddenly, invisible no more. I watched through the clear office window as Sarah's face drained from confident peach to office paper white. She spun toward the tech pit, barking orders that made no sense: restart the back end. Re-enable the marketing flow. Fix it now. As if years of structure could be undone by yelling louder. One developer tried to explain that nothing was broken. The system was doing exactly what it was designed to do. Its architect had final say. She didn't like that answer. At 1:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. From COO subject, urgent, we need you in conference room immediately. I walked slowly. Not out of pettiness, but because power feels different when you're no longer clinging to it. Inside the conference room were 5 executives, a cluster of shaken managers, and one VP who looked like she'd aged 10 years since breakfast. The COO didn't waste time. Liam, we need your authorization to restore the campaign. I sat. Calm, collected, the eye of the storm. I'm not on the project, I said plainly. That was Sarah's decision. The room went dead still. Sarah looked like she wanted to interrupt, but she didn't dare. Her voice had lost its confident edge. Liam, please. The system is just being difficult. No, I corrected gently. It's working exactly as intended. A simple statement, but it landed like a hammer. The CFO leaned forward. What do you want? There it was. The real moment. The moment they never expected to face. I didn't ask for revenge. I didn't ask for money. I didn't ask for a title reset. I asked for respect. I want my role restored. Full oversight of system architecture. Direct reporting line to the COO. And my team back, without interference. Silence again. Heavy. Calculating. The COO glanced around the room, then nodded once. Done. Sarah flinched. You can't, the COO cut her off. You launched without him. You own this. And just like that, the hierarchy shifted. I entered the room as an afterthought. I left it as the one person they couldn't function without. Outside, as I walked back through the office, people watched me differently, less like background infrastructure, more like the spine they'd forgotten they needed. And behind me, Sarah remained in that glass conference room, isolated, reflecting on the one truth she'd built her career ignoring: you don't cut the architect and expect the house to stand. The next 48 hours turned the office into a war zone of whispered alliances, emergency meetings, and reputation scrambling. I didn't have to lift a finger. The system, the contracts, and Sarah's arrogance did all the work for me. By the next morning, every department felt the ripple effect. Marketing couldn't run ads. Finance couldn't process payments. Sales couldn't onboard clients. Operations couldn't track fulfillment. The entire company, hundreds of employees, was frozen because one VP wanted her name on a headline. Yet the executives kept their cool in public. They issued neatly worded internal memos about unexpected downtime and temporary issues. But everyone knew something bigger was happening behind the curtain. When a billion-dollar company goes silent in the middle of a launch, people sense blood in the water. Around noon, the CEO finally returned from a trip. She walked straight past her assistant, ignored two directors calling her name, and marched into the conference room with the force of someone who already knew she was about to be disappointed. 5 minutes later, Sarah was summoned. I didn't see what happened inside that room, but the glass walls did nothing to hide the CEO's expression, the same expression a parent gives a child who just smashed something expensive and irreplaceable. Sarah tried to gesture, argue, explain, but her words bounced uselessly off the CEO's unimpressed stare. The CEO finally pressed a hand to her forehead, shook her head, and said something that made Sarah's face crumple. Her mouth opened in protest, but the CEO simply pointed to the door. Sarah left in silence. Shoulders fallen. Eyes red. Power evaporated. As she passed my desk, she didn't look at me. She couldn't. Not because I gloated, I didn't, but because she finally realized the truth. She had tried to cut out the foundation of the system, and now she was the one being removed. What came next was almost surreal. The CEO called me into the conference room. But this time, it wasn't a plea for help, it was respect, maybe even gratitude. "Liam," she said, "we built too much of this company on assumptions and shortcuts. You've been giving warnings for years, and we ignored them. We won't make that mistake again." She paused, studying my face to make sure I understood the weight of her next words. "I want you to take full architectural authority. End to end. No interference, no VP overrides, and no politics. From this point forward, you sign off on every major system decision." It wasn't an offer. It was a reformation. I nodded. "Then let's fix the mess." The CEO gave a thin, grateful smile. "We're already better off than we were yesterday." That afternoon, the company realigned itself around the truth. The architecture wasn't a department, they discovered it was the backbone. My team, people who had endured Sarah's dismissiveness for years, looked relieved, almost lighter, as I called them into our war room. Not because I was in charge, but because they knew someone who respected their work was steering the ship again. And by midnight, we had the platform back online, stable, compliant, safe. Meanwhile, news reached us from HR. Sarah had officially resigned to explore new opportunities. In reality, no one wanted to work with her. No one believed her story. No one trusted her judgment. The industry moves fast, but reputational damage sticks slower than tar. As for me, the shift was subtle but unmistakable. Suddenly the company wasn't just functioning, it was listening, learning, and planning with care instead of ego. Meetings were clearer. Decisions were smarter. Technical concerns weren't brushed aside, they were prioritized. And somewhere in the chaos, I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't just reclaim my role. I reshaped the entire company. Corporate revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about restoring balance where arrogance caused collapse. By the end of that week, the board called for what they politely labeled a post-launch strategic review, but let's be honest, it was an inquest. A quiet, clinical autopsy of everything Sarah had broken, everything leadership had ignored, and everything I had spent years trying to protect them from. They didn't invite me as a guest this time. They seated me at the table. When a company moves you from the audience to the panel, something fundamental has shifted. And everyone in that room felt it. Directors asked for my assessment. Legal asked for my risk projections. Finance asked for long-term viability planning. For the first time in the company's history, every major decision circled back to one question: did Liam approve it? I didn't revel in it, but I won't pretend it didn't feel good. Respect shouldn't take a catastrophe. But it often does. Still, the real turning point happened near the end of the review, when the CEO leaned forward in front of everyone and said, "You've kept this company alive longer than any of us realized. Tell us how to make sure nothing like this ever happens again." There it was. Not a request for damage control, a request for guidance. For leadership. For trust. So I laid it out. A governance restructure, no executive overrides on technical sign-offs, a mandatory architect review for all platform changes, a freeze on promotions for roles above their technical capacity, a new protocol requiring transparency across engineering and product. None of it was flashy. None of it was dramatic. But it was the kind of structure that turned a fragile house of cards into something that could actually stand. And the board approved every single point. After the meeting, when the directors filed out, the COO stayed behind. She closed the door gently and exhaled. "You know," she said, "most people would have burned us to the ground after what happened." I shrugged. "I didn't need to. You did it to yourselves." She cracked a small smile. "Fair enough. But you could have let us crash." "You didn't." I met her eyes. "I didn't want a graveyard. I wanted accountability. And you got it," she said quietly. "And something else, a seat at the table you earned years ago." Her tone wasn't condescending. It was honest. Earnest, even. She extended her hand. "Let's build this company the right way." I shook it, not because I needed validation, but because I had finally been given the authority to do what I'd always done: protect the structure that everyone else took for granted. In the weeks that followed, the company changed faster than anyone expected. Not because of fear, but because people finally understood the cost of arrogance. Teams collaborated more. Executives deferred instead of dictated. And the system, my system, became the blueprint for every major decision the company made moving forward. As for Sarah, her downfall echoed quietly through the industry. Her interviews dried up. Her networking circle shrank. And every recruiter who requested references heard the same story: strong ambition, weak judgment. Meanwhile, I wasn't gloating. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't even thinking about revenge anymore. Because this wasn't the kind of revenge that left ashes behind. This was the kind that left a legacy. A company rebuilt on respect. A structure finally supported instead of undermined. And a truth no one would ever forget: you can fire a title. You can replace a position. But you can't pretend the architect doesn't matter, not when the entire system rests on his shoulders. The real closure came a month later, not during a meeting, not during a dramatic confrontation, but in the most ordinary moment imaginable. I was walking through the lobby on my way to a late engineering sync when I overheard two newer employees talking near the reception desk. They didn't see me, didn't know who I was, just two analysts chatting while waiting for coffee. One of them said, "I heard leadership used to override the architect all the time. Can you imagine?" The other laughed softly. "Not anymore." Here, nothing goes live unless Liam says it's structurally sound. That's just how things work now. No drama. No tension. Just casual acceptance, like it was the most obvious truth in the world. That's when it hit me. Revenge wasn't the shutdown. It wasn't Sarah's downfall. It wasn't the chaos or the panic or the scramble to fix what she broke. Revenge was hearing two people who had never met me speak as if I were the gravity holding everything steady. That's what lasting impact looks like. Later that day, while reviewing a new rollout proposal with the senior engineering leads, one of them paused before leaving the room and said, almost shyly, "Feels good having you back where you belong." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Not because I needed the praise, I'd done the work long before anyone noticed, but because the organization finally understood the truth. A system survives on structure, not ego. A team thrives on clarity, not ambition. And a company stands only as strong as the architect who built its foundation. Meanwhile, Sarah's name faded from the company's Slack channels, from calendar invites, from conversation. She became a cautionary tale, the kind executives reference quietly when someone begins to overstep their domain. Don't go full Sarah, they joke. Light-hearted. But true. A reminder of what happens when ambition ignores architecture. As for me, I didn't stay out of spite. I stayed because the company finally became a place where my work meant something, where my voice wasn't stamped out by people who didn't understand what they were breaking. And in a strange, poetic way, Sarah did give me something, unintentionally, of course. She gave me the moment where everything snapped into alignment. Where the people who once dismissed me were forced to reckon with reality. Where my expertise wasn't optional. Where the role I'd built with years of quiet grind finally held the weight it deserved. And the best part? I didn't have to destroy the company to get justice. I just had to let their own mistakes show them who the real architect was. The funny thing about corporate revenge is that people expect fire, shouting, slammed doors, badge deactivations, dramatic exits. But the most satisfying endings rarely arrive with noise. They arrive quietly, in moments the villains never get to witness. 2 weeks after everything settled, I was invited to a small off-site with the CTO and 3 senior leaders. Nothing flashy, just a strategy retreat at a quiet lodge a few hours out of the city. The kind of place where people speak honestly because there's no audience, no Slack threads, no politics thickening the air. We spent the day mapping the next 12 months of infrastructure, and for the first time in years, every person in the room actually listened when I spoke. No interruptions. No "let's circle back." No condescending rephrasings of things I had already explained. Just respect, sturdy and unforced. When the session ended, the CTO lingered behind as the others walked out toward the deck. He tapped the whiteboard lightly and said, "You know, Sarah never understood what you were building. To her it was just a system. To you, it's a living ecosystem. We should have trusted that sooner." I didn't answer right away. Not because I was searching for the perfect line, but because hearing that kind of humility from someone at his level, it was rare. And honest. "She tried to launch something she didn't understand," I finally said. "The system didn't fail her. She failed the system." He nodded. "And you saved us from ourselves." That line stuck with me. Because he wasn't wrong. If I hadn't activated the kill clause, Sarah's launch would have detonated a hole in the company big enough to drown half the engineering org, and they wouldn't have realized the danger until it was far too late. By the time evening fell, the team was laughing on the deck, beer bottles clinking, the sky turning soft and golden. But I stood off to the side for a moment, looking out over the water, letting everything settle. I wasn't the hero of the story. I wasn't the villain either. I was the architect. The one who built the thing they all relied on. The one they tried to ignore, until ignoring me nearly cost them everything. And maybe that's the real revenge, being indispensable in a world that once treated you like you were replaceable. Sarah burned her reputation trying to claim a launch she didn't earn. I kept mine by protecting a system she never understood. In the end, my silence hit harder than any confrontation. My kill clause taught them what my words never could. And the company rebuilt itself around the one truth they'd been avoiding: you can't sideline the person who holds the blueprint. In the weeks that followed, the company quietly rewrote its entire launch protocol. New safeguards. New approval chains. New respect for the people who actually build the foundations executives love to stand on. They never mentioned my kill clause in any meeting notes. They never spoke Sarah's name again. They never admitted publicly what almost happened. But the silence was its own confession. The CTO pulled me aside one morning and said, "From now on, nothing goes live without you." Not a request. A rule. Funny how quickly priorities change once arrogance gets a taste of consequences. As for Sarah, she left the company before HR could finish the post-mortem. Word around the industry was that she tried interviewing for another leadership role, but every reference call circled back to one question: how did you lose control of the launch? She never found a good answer. And me? I didn't need revenge anymore. The system spoke for me. The truth spoke for me. Reality delivered the justice I didn't have to lift a finger to create. In the end, the person they tried to cut out became the one they couldn't move forward without. That's the thing about being the architect: you don't win by fighting. You win by letting the structure collapse exactly where the wrong people try to stand. And this time, it collapsed right on schedule.